The new prophecies, from Daniel's vision to the end of Persia with each generation. God's great plan is realized through major events and special individuals whom he has chosen as instruments for his mission. The Persian Empire, one of the most powerful and mysterious empires in history, not only played a role as a tool for the redemption of Israel, but also became an essential part of the prophecies concerning the future. What Daniel saw and what God spoke through him were signs of a great battle between empires, a battle in which Persia, a pagan empire, would participate, but in the miraculous way that God had ordained. Daniel and the vision of the beast's prophecy. Of the rise of the Persian Empire in his visions, Daniel saw strange beasts, each representing a major empire in human history. These beasts were not merely empires in the material world, but also symbols of power, change, and destinies ordained by God. Each beast, whether a lion, a bear, or a goat, carried a part of the great plan that God had outlined. One of the most significant visions Daniel received was of a giant bear, with 3 broken ribs in its mouth, symbolizing the empires of Media and Persia. God showed Daniel that this bear, with its strength and devastation, would take over the power of Babylon and dominate a vast region. But a greater empire, with superior power, would rise after it. This was the Greek Empire. However, these beasts were not simply representations of empires but also symbols of change in God's plan. The Persian Empire, with all its strength and power, would play the role of God's instrument in fulfilling the mission he had assigned to the people of Israel. That is why Persia was not just an enemy of Babylon but also a tool to complete the promise of the restoration of the temple and the freedom of Israel. Cyrus, God's chosen leader when the Persian Empire rose to become a mighty empire. Daniel's prophecy about the bear came to fruition. Under the leadership of King Cyrus, the Persian Empire easily defeated Babylon, exactly as the prophecy had foretold. But more importantly, in the process of defeating Babylon, Cyrus not only accomplished a military task but also fulfilled a divine mission. To understand the importance of Cyrus in God's plan, we must recognize him not only as a pagan king, but as an instrument chosen by God. Cyrus was chosen by God to do what no one could imagine. He not only liberated the Israelites from slavery under Babylon but also provided money and resources to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. The reason Cyrus did this was not because he was a believer in God but because he was chosen by God to fulfill the prophecy. Cyrus, who did not follow the faith of Israel, played a decisive role in the restoration of the people of Israel and the rebuilding of the Jerusalem temple. This is a miracle that can only be understood when we see the hand of God guiding the process. The fulfillment of the prophecy. Persia and the plan to redeem Israel. Cyrus fulfilled the prophecies spoken by God through Isaiah, which the people of Israel had been waiting for during their 70 years of exile. It was under Cyrus's leadership that the people of Israel were allowed to return to their homeland, from which they had been exiled after the destruction of Babylon. Moreover, Cyrus ordered them to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, a structure that had been completely destroyed at the hands of Babylon in the Bible. Isaiah's prophecy is clearly seen in this event. I will go before you and will level the mountains. I will break down gates of bronze and cut through bars of iron. Isaiah 45 Bunding Dua. This word became a reality when Cyrus paved the way for the return of the Israelites and the rebuilding of the temple. For each Israelite returning to Jerusalem, the work of rebuilding was not just about constructing a physical temple but about restoring a spiritual relationship with God. The temple was not just an architectural structure but also a symbol of God's presence among his people. Through Cyrus allowing the Israelites to rebuild the temple, God fulfilled his promise that he would never forsake his people. Persia and the final prophecy, the attack of Gog and Magog. Persia played a redemptive and restorative role for Israel for a long time. The empire's fate did not end there. The prophecy in the book of Ezekiel spoke of a grim future when Persia, along with other nations, would become part of the final battle against Israel. In his vision, Ezekiel saw the rise of Gog and Magog, an alliance of nations that would rise against Israel in the last days. The Bible records, "They will advance against you like a storm and will be like a cloud covering the land. You and all your troops and many nations with you." Ezekiel 38-9. Persia, though once a tool of redemption in the past, would now become part of the alliance against God's people. This is a significant turning point because it shows that not all empires will continue to serve as instruments of God. Although Persia had a great role in restoring Israel, one day, this very nation would be judged in the final days. The miracle of Esther. Persia saves Israel once again, but in this miraculous story, Persia was not only an enemy of Israel, but also the site of miracles. In this very empire, the story of Esther, a Jewish woman who became queen of King Ahasuerus, saved her people from annihilation. God used Esther to reverse the genocidal plan that Haman, the enemy of the Jews, had devised. Esther, though not a follower of the faith of Israel, saved her people by courageously standing before the king and revealing Haman's plot at the end of this conflict. Persia once again became an instrument of God, but in a different light. Persia was no longer the dominant empire in the world, but became part of the redemption plan through the miracles that God performed.